I think we get fixated on the technological delivery of content, but what people really do care about is content.
Welcome to the podcast studio, Christian.
Thank you.
And welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Today, we will discuss predictions and trends within tech, media, and telecom, or TMT, as we like to call it, with main focus on streaming today. But before we dive into it, maybe you guys could give an introduction of who you are and your latest favorite streaming contents. To start with you, Christian?
Yes, I'm coming from TV2 in Norway, the largest commercial TV house or media house in Norway. And I'm responsible for our Play service, our streaming service, and our technology division. Mm-hmm. And I like to watch streaming, of course. I like many of our shows. It's Norwegian shows, so they have Norwegian names, like, for instance, Traitor in English or Forklarer in Norske. The Norwegian's Dumbest, which was quite popular, surprisingly, this fall. But also shows like Power of the Rings on Amazon, for instance. Those kind of, very expensive content, but high quality.
How long have you been in TV2?
Almost 8 years.
So you know it quite well then?
Yeah, but most people have been there for 20 or 30, so I'm still a newbie. Yeah, TV.
8 years and still a newbie. That's nice, though. And you, Paul?
So I'm a Deloitte partner from London, and my slightly different role I have as a partner is actually just to focus on research. So I don't have any clients. So I look at what's happening in the market and talk to clients and also on this podcast about what we're seeing in the market.
Yeah.
And I will make one suggestion as to what I'm watching at the moment, or what I've just finished watching, which is a series called Rivals. And this is on Disney+. It was made by ITV Studios, which is a commercial broadcaster and also studio in the UK. And it's about the UK TV sector in the 1980s, but with a lot of flair added to it. So it's 18 plus. So anyone who's under 18, you can't watch it. But it is very lively.
Thank you. So Rivals and Traders, you guys have kind of the same interests, I hear?
Documentaries, basically.
Documentaries. Well, let's dive into it. The first question is sort of a big one, but we see that the business of television is evolving, and so is the industry of streaming. So how do you predict this evolution in the years to come?
So the business of streaming basically doesn't go away, but the distribution of it, I think, is going to change. And in the last decade, what we had was lots of existing companies pivoting to going direct to market, which is great in the sense of you capture a lot of the revenues, but also is difficult in that looking after consumers at an individual level is quite hard to do. And if you haven't done it before, culturally, organizationally, is quite hard to do. And one reason why we had direct to consumer was because pay TV aggregated and the view was, that's bad. What I think we're going to move back to is aggregation via pay TV, but also other entities. So they could be telcos, they could be big tech platforms. But I think we're going to move back to aggregation, partly because that's a business model. And then over a 10-year basis, I expect a lot of the broadcast content, which is currently being consumed, will migrate to a stream because the cost of delivering broadcast content is expensive. Keeping up that broadcasting equipment is very expensive, and the quality of broadband networks gets better and better all the time. If you're used to live TV, I think we will still have live TV, but it will be delivered as a stream and not on demand.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we already see this shift in Norway, actually. This year, I think what we deliver through streaming will surpass what we are distributing as ordinary TV. So our consumption of TV2 services will be higher on streaming this year than traditional TV.
Was it like this last year? Or?
No, well, last year it was almost equal, but streaming will be bigger this year. And we can also see that we are able if we talk in big figures, to replace what we lose on linear with streaming, which is, we are quite happy with that. I don't think that is the case for all media houses or TV houses, but we have so far managed that. And we also see that somehow typically was live on TV is we try to move that also into streaming.
Okay.
So we are struggling with that, and we're also setting up a new technology platform, which is more based on OTT technology that is made for internet video distribution, also for the broadcast part. Okay. Because the old platforms, as you mentioned, are so expensive. And we are a little country with few people to pay for all this content, so we have to do it cheap.
Yeah, that's a very impressive ratio. So if I compare your stats to the UK numbers, for a long time, for the broadcasters in the UK, the average proportion which was streamed is about 10%, and now it's about 14%. So compared to your over 50%, it's very different. And streaming does make up for the losses in live, but not one-to-one. It makes up some of the losses.
It doesn't make up one-to-one. What do you mean by that?
So what Christian was saying was that they are shifting a broadcast viewing hour to a streaming viewing hour. And in the UK, the losses on broadcast are not being replaced. So you don't have an hour replacing an hour. You lose an hour and you might regain 20, 30 minutes or so.
Okay. But that's impressive, Christian, as you mentioned, there are challenges. We'll go into that a bit, but if we looked at the numbers from 2023, we saw that of all the paid streaming services in Norway, then TV2 Play comes in at a very impressive second place after Netflix. Is this still the case for 2024? And what are some of the keys to this success?
I think we will give them good competition, yes. It's difficult to say exactly how big they are in Norway. We have some measurements. They are maybe a little bit higher than us when it comes to coverage, the number of households they reach each month. But when it comes to production of minutes, all the viewing added up together, I think maybe we can beat them, maybe. I don't know. But what we have, I shall not say lucky with, but we have worked very hard on our content, actually. And right now, last year, we had several big hits. So we have a good content position. It's not for sure that we can maintain that position forever, but if we continue to have shows and series that actually Norwegian want in the way that we experienced in last year, and also have the amount of sport that we so far have the rights for, I think we will be one of the biggest players in Norway. But this is a kind of championship each year, so we'll see.
We'll have to aim high, but you're saying that so you're having big hits with the content. Is that has been a part of your strategy to work more?
But we cannot compete with the big international streaming services when it comes to quality of series. We cannot put that much into production. But what we have been benefiting from is much reality with celebrities from Norway, which Norwegian care about. It's cheaper to produce, of course, than the big international series and movies. So have taken a good position with reality and with the news and with the sports.
Norwegians like some cheap reality. That's good for business.
Well, it's high quality productions, but compared to, for instance, as I mentioned, Lord of the Rings, for instance, it's
everything's cheap compared to that.
Do you think that TV2 being a TV channel contributes to the success?
Yeah, well, we have a known brand in Norway, but also a TV channel. If you go some years back, I think being a broadcaster was a legacy that was not compelling to the young people, especially that adopted Netflix early. But now I think streaming is so common, and we are more known about the content more than being a TV channel. Yeah. It's the content that is important, and the distribution that we have included TV2 Play, our streaming service, into the big packages from all the TV distributors. So almost all households in Norway have our service available. So you just have to go into it, and so it's easy to get the content, and we have good content. That's the key.
Yeah. There is a change happening, and personally, I don't watch TV broadcasting anymore, but I do watch streaming. With Paul, so how are consumer behaviors and expectations changing, and how are the broadcasters adapting to this?
So I'll share one stat with you. So in the UK now, we've got measurements of what people watch at home. And so rather than it being an estimate or self-reported data, it's actual measurement. So it's the most accurate form of market sizing that there is. And one thing which is really interesting is, so I was looking at some of the measured data on a 12-month rolling average basis, and the average time spent watching video per person was 4 hours, plus or minus 1 minute over a long period of time. So one thing which is really amazing is just how constant behaviors are. So the inputs are varying, the distribution is varying, but the time spent watching video, absolutely rigid, right? And this is for people aged 2+. And I think we get fixated on the technological delivery of content, but what people really do care about is content, because what content provides is a mirror to ourselves, which is why I think reality TV really resonates. And it's also a mirror to society. So really good reality TV will have a cross-section of society, which enables you to root for a person or another person. And I remember when Big Brother came out for the first time in the UK, everyone talked about it for the entire duration of its transmission, which was multiple weeks, every single day with 1 day off. But it just gripped everyone because this was a mirror to UK society. And I don't think we will ever get tired at looking at ourselves, because that effectively is what TV is. And the other thing that TV is doing is it's bringing people together. And generally, society is becoming more solitary. We're doing more things on our own. And the time that you actually spend with someone else often is watching a piece of TV content and reacting to it together. So content will never go away. We'll always want our fireside moment. It will never go away. And in 10 years' time, these discussions around streaming or broadcast would have gone away, because largely it will all be streamed. And so what will matter at that point is content. And what people enjoy, so the benefit of national broadcasters is they know national tastes. If you're a global streamer, it is a lot harder to guess what Norwegians will want. And their fascination with themselves will never be extinguished.
Yeah, that is exactly our position, is to know the Norwegian market well and try to find the programs and the people that actually reflects Norwegian reality. And that's why reality is so popular.
Wow.
Yeah. So and we're also able to attract young people. But that because we are using influencers and YouTube stars that actually are young and appeal to the young people, which has been somehow the formula behind the success we have had the last years.
Yeah, we're jumping right into this with the younger audience, because it is harder to attract the younger audience. Is there any other? So you're using influencer, etc. Is there any other tricks here, you think?
No, but we see that when we first have become a popular streaming service, we hit younger than the TV channels. That's just the way it is. But the trick is, of course, to have people there that the young people relate to. That is very, very important. And most of those people, they have YouTube channels or are very popular in social media, and they talk about the show, and then they want people to watch them on the show. So they are also marketing our content, actually.
Is it always like the relating to someone? Because I can watch TV where I don't relate to them at all, but I find it very fascinating because it's so different from my life. So maybe it's not a mirror, it's more of an
inverse.
Yeah?
But you heard about them, and you're curious. And what we need to generate is what we call buzz, that people are talking about our content or celebrities or the people that we have in the show.
The content with the most reach in the UK tends to be broadcast content, and this includes amongst the 18 to 24-year-olds, 18 to 30-year-olds. And there is one reality TV format, which is Love Island, which effectively is about dating. And of course, so it's very relatable because it appeals to people at that stage of life and kind of the decisions that they may have to take. But in a slightly cartoon format, but still, there have always been and always will be programs about dating in different flavors because it's a fundamental human behavior.
Yeah, like I said, we have the rights for Love Island in Norway, and the Love Island UK is quite popular, and also when we have Norwegian version of it. So yeah, that's typical content that is going home and quite popular among young people.
Is there any content which you have been surprised that that became a big success, that maybe it wasn't expected to be so successful?
We can be honest to say that Norges dummeste, the Norwegian dumbest, which has its premiere this fall, was a typical relatively cheap production, of which we were very uncertain about the potential. But if my memory serves me well, that was one of the programs with more than 1 million Norwegians watching some of the episodes. So that became quite popular.
Yeah.
That was maybe a surprise, I don't know.
A little bit more back to technical, but Paul, if we see a shift from then stacking multiple streaming subscriptions over to like bundle services, could you talk a little bit about the difference in that?
Yeah, so with stacking, it's basically where you've got multiple services that you contract to individually, and the expectation was that people keep on adding to them. The reality is that I think you reach a limit. So in Europe, it's about 2.5 subscriptions per person. And I think in some of those cases, what you're going to have is perhaps some of those two being combined or being bought via a third party. So you might have a telco subscription and you'll add your video on demand subscriptions into that. So you just have one bill. So you've got aggregation coming in. And the aggregation is happening a lot more in the US at the moment, but that's partly because people had bigger stacks and they're being rationalized. So some of the services which were two separate ones are being bundled into one. There have been attempts to try and bundle sports streaming into one meta package, so combining all three of them, and negotiations are still ongoing. So it's about simplicity. So a few years ago, the idea was people want autonomy, they want to be able to choose. The reality is they just want a simple life and a discount.
Yes, it's that balance between it being easier, but also not the highest cost. So finding where's the sweet spot where the audience is actually willing to pay for that.
Yeah.
How can broadcasters like TV2 capitalize on this shift?
Yeah. Well, we don't know if we like to be, or we are bundled today in the TV distributor.
With what?
In the TV distributors packages. We are bundled and that has made us more distributed. So that has been good for us. But that is, as I said, more a collection of streaming services that they include in a package. I think it's a market for that. People, as Paul say, want is simple. But we have another trend is what we call aggregation, where different streaming services are aggregated, maybe with a common front or is kind of merged into other services.
So it's a third party then?
But that could be, for instance, a platform like Apple tried to do that some years ago, they maybe still are doing. Google is also doing that, actually. They try to build a front which is in front of the other streaming services. So they are recommending the content and route people to the right asset on the different services, which is a little bit more scary, I think.
Yeah.
So
power. A form of consolidation is probably going to be to a single search bar. So this is what you used to have in the pay TV days. And when you move to separate canisters of content, you lost that. And what's happening now is going back to a single search bar across all the content you've got access to. And it may be in different services, but that's a chore. That's painful. It's work for the viewer. You don't want to have to do work when you're looking to relax in the evening. You want simplicity. So to give an example, in the UK, some of the pay TV providers, they bundle their services along with video on demand providers, and they have a single library. So you can type in what you want to watch and it will show all of that content, even if that content is split amongst lots of different services. And there is one program, Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy.
So I'll do that. So there is one series which stretches possibly 19 series, and it's on different services in the UK. But if you've got this service, when you look for that content, it's all on a single page, and you can choose which series and which episode. You don't have to go in and out of apps.
Okay.
So it's rationalized, but we're effectively going back to what we had. So we came up with a problem, came up with a solution, realized we didn't like the solution, so we're going back to what we had.
But so we're going back to the good old pay TV days. But at that point, it was what was shown to us. Like, we could decide between the channels, but it was what was showing at that time. Now we can choose from anywhere, and also the content we want. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, happy days.
Happy days are coming. So the consumers want it easy, and as mentioned, then TV2 plays on the second of the paid subscriptions. But what's even better than easy might be free. So what about the free ad-supported platforms? Who are the biggest competitors to broadcasters here?
YouTube is a
yeah.
big competitor, for instance, which, at least the basic service is free with ads. They also have the premium service. But again, the markets are different. So markets have traditionally been what we call free to air from the broadcast days, where much of the content is free with ads. In Norway, we have always, or at least the last 20 years, had paid TV. We are a small market. Ads will not... it's not enough revenue in ads to make all the content. So we also need to have subscription. It has always been like that, as I said. So here it will be a combination. But also in Norway, we see, I think all the players now have a cheaper subscription with the subscription fee, but with ads. Or you can pay typically 70 Norwegian crowns extra and have it without ads. So the users can choose, actually.
So the combination, because everything is...
And you see it also from the big streamers. They're adopting the same model, I think, globally, all over.
I think it's
so they're moving to... Because to be able to pay for all the content created, you have to raise prices. But if you raise prices, you lose subscribers. So middle ground is you pay, but also you watch ads, generate revenues. And that's great in the US market, where the cost per 1,000 views is really, really high. So it can be about $70. But replicating that in Europe is not going to happen, because advertisers pay a lot less for video ads.
Why is that?
The market's a lot smaller. So if you think of the Super Bowl, that it's millions of dollars per 30-second slot. And you just don't have that in Europe, because the market is a lot more fragmented. So the Super Bowl, I think this year was about 120 million viewers. So if you reach 120 million people in one go, that's a unique opportunity. And you can spend a lot of money on creating the ad, promoting the ad, and then paying for the slot. But it works in the US, but there is no other market really like that anywhere else in the world.
All right, so we're talking about predictions, and we cannot really talk about the future of streaming without touching on AI. Paul, where do you see the biggest potential of the use of generative AI when it comes to streaming?
So there are lots of possible applications right now, but there are not that many useful ones at the moment. And we've had literally hundreds of discussions with companies about what they're actually doing. And generally, most companies in all fields, including media, are experimenting with Gen AI. So the issue with Gen AI is the outcomes are based on a probabilistic model. So you don't know what's going to come out. So if you want to use, for example, generative AI for journalism, you run the risk of creating inaccuracy, which for a news organization, if you matter, is significant. If your news doesn't matter, then it's fine. And what we see is at the moment where Gen AI is useful, it's where you have a relatively low value application that you can automate. So what we're seeing, for example, is social media prompts. Gen AI is really good for that. But then, the cost of creating them was relatively low, but creating lots of them is expensive. And so you're just removing that cost. What we're seeing is some advertising content is being created using Gen AI, but it tends to be if you're doing a human-like animal, which sounds like a contradiction. But if you think of like, say for a brand, if they have an animal that represents them, then even if you automate that animal, people don't know what animals look like when they're running. So you can use Gen AI to create that and people can't see the mistakes. If you try and use Gen AI to automate a person running in the rain, people will go, that's fake. And people don't like being fooled. So the bottom line is, at the moment, I don't see significant usage of Gen AI in the streaming world or generally in the media sector, except for low-level tasks.
So not for content, but maybe more for operational tasks.
For example, if you're trying to think of using Gen AI to come up with ideas, I don't think that's very viable because, as Christian was saying, if you're a really good broadcaster, you understand your market. The knowledge of your market is in people's heads. It is not in a digital format. The other thing about coming up with good ideas is knowing where taste is going to. If you use Gen AI, what you get is a summary of what's happened. So it's going to work in the wrong way. So I remember, last year, for example, we used Gen AI to come up with predictions for 24, for ideas. And it came up with a metaverse, which we were saying wasn't going to happen. But because it was based on historic data, it just averaged historic data. But the skill of a really good writer is knowing where taste is moving to and coming up with that idea a year or 2 or 3 years before it actually happens. So you've got time for the idea to come to broadcast. And that's really, really difficult. But most of the best knowledge which is out there is in people's heads. It is not written down. And the other thing I find with Gen AI is it's like, so if you just train it, for example, on finished outputs, you don't get the creative process. The creative process is all the iterations that happen, all the mistakes that are made. That is knowledge. That's intelligence. It's not the final output. Memorizing the final output is easy. Understanding how to get that final output, that's where the magic is.
How do you in TV use AI or specifically generative?
I think we're using AI a lot and are experimenting and also have some systems in production. It's not really generative AI, but we are making much of sports production with AI. For instance, we have a big camera with an extremely high resolution, and actually I don't know if it's again AI or not, but actually what it's doing is panning the camera and zooming in and out, and I can do that you can train it, and I can do it quite well. But we want people to be creative and use as much time to produce good content, and only that, and to make the experience for the end user as good as possible. And my goal is to automate all the operations that happens between those two endpoints.
Okay, well, I'll have to invite you back to the podcast when you have achieved your goal. Time is flying, just as when you're watching TV. So we have to round it off. Does any final remarks or anything you think the listener should take from this episode that's more important?
Humans need entertainment to feel human, and that demand will never go away. And what they like is texture and ambiguity. And they also really like being with other people and seeing people with other people. The idea that people would want to secrete themselves on their own in virtual worlds, I think is very wrong. But I think the allure of that never goes away for some people. So I think we need to have as a North Star the idea or the reality that people like being with other people. And one example I remember of that is there were a few reality competitions at the end of last year. So it's like lookalikes. And there was one which was held in Dublin, and it was a Paul Mescal lookalike. And you had hundreds of people getting together just for the sake of getting together, because the prize money for that was a €10 voucher at Lidl. So obviously people weren't doing it for the money, but it's simply because people enjoy being with other people. And this is one of the really important mechanics of television, is enabling people to get together, friends or family. It doesn't go away. So don't lose sight of that.
I love that. Any final remarks, Christian?
No, I think Paul framed very exactly what television and the streaming will be in the future. That's to have something to share, something that is common, and also that people are entertained. Actually, people want to be entertained.
It's easy as that. People want to be entertained, and I think what really stuck to me today was definitely bringing people together, but also the mirror to yourself and to society. It makes all the sense. So thank you very much for coming here to the podcast studio today to give us all this valuable insight. And to you, listener, thank you for listening. And I'll say, as we always do, vi høres.